He's considered to be the oldest human mummy found intact, and scientists believe he died more than 5,000 years ago.
Imagine this. You're hiking through the pristine Alps, breathing in that crisp mountain air, when suddenly you see what looks like a leather doll poking out of the ice. But as you get closer, your blood runs cold. Those aren't leather features. They're human, mummified, ancient. What you've just discovered will rewrite everything we thought we knew about our ancestors and reveal a murder mystery that's been frozen in time for over 5,000 years. This is the story of Ötzi the Iceman and how cutting-edge DNA science just solved secrets that have puzzled archaeologists for decades. It was Thursday, September 19th, 1991. German tourists Helmut and Erika Simon were descending from the Finale-Spitze Peak in the Ötztal Alps, taking what they thought would be a scenic shortcut back to their lodge. The weather was unusually warm for September, the kind of heat that makes glaciers weep. Helmut spotted it first. "What's that brown thing sticking out of the ice?" he called to his wife. As they approached the rocky gully, they realized with horror that they were staring at a human head and shoulders, perfectly preserved, emerging from the melting glacier. "We thought it was a mountaineer who had died recently," Erika would later recall, her voice still shaking decades after the discovery. "Maybe someone from the 1980s who got caught in a storm." But this wasn't just any hiking accident. The couple had stumbled upon what would become the most significant archaeological discovery of the 20th century, a time capsule from the Copper Age, frozen in ice for 5,300 years. The body was so well preserved that rescue teams initially treated it as a modern crime scene. Austrian authorities were called in, helicopters circled overhead. But as archaeologists carefully extracted the remains, along with a treasure trove of ancient artifacts, a copper axe, a longbow, leather clothing, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't a recent victim. This was someone from the dawn of civilization itself. Dr. Andreas Lippert, the Austrian archaeologist who first examined the remains, remembers the moment it hit him. "When I saw that copper axe, I knew we were dealing with something extraordinary. The craftsmanship, the preservation. This was like shaking hands with someone from 3,300 BC. They named him Ötzi, after the valley where he was found. And as scientists began their painstaking analysis, a remarkable portrait emerged of a man who lived when the pyramids were just being built, when Stonehenge was still under construction. Ötzi stood about 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed roughly 110 pounds, average for his time but compact and muscular. His hands were calloused from years of hard work. His feet showed the wear patterns of someone who walked vast distances across rocky terrain. This wasn't a sedentary farmer, this was a man of the mountains. But perhaps most intriguingly, Ötzi was covered in tattoos. 61 of them made with charcoal and soot, strategically placed on his body. Unlike modern decorative tattoos, Ötzi's appeared to serve a medical purpose, primitive acupuncture points marking areas where he suffered from arthritis and chronic pain. "Looking at Ötzi," explains Dr. Albert Zink, director of the Institute for Mummy Studies, "is like looking into a mirror of human struggle. Here was a man dealing with the same health issues, the same physical challenges that people face today." But Ötzi carried something else with him, secrets that would remain locked away until 2023, when scientists finally cracked the code of his DNA. For over 30 years, Ötzi sat in his climate-controlled chamber in Bolzano, Italy, keeping his secrets. Scientists had analyzed his stomach contents. His last meal included red deer, ibex, and bread. They'd studied his tools, his clothing, even the pollen trapped in his gear. But his DNA, that remained largely a mystery. The problem was technological. Ancient DNA is fragmented, degraded, contaminated. It's like trying to read a book where most of the pages have been torn up and scattered to the wind. For decades, scientists could only extract tiny pieces of Ötzi's genetic story. But in 2023, everything changed. Dr. Johannes Krauss and his team at the Max Planck Institute achieved what seemed impossible. They sequenced Ötzi's entire genome. Using revolutionary techniques that can work with the tiniest fragments of ancient DNA, they were able to reconstruct the complete genetic blueprint of our Copper Age ancestor. It was like switching from a fuzzy black and white television to a 4K ultra-high definition screen. Explains Dr. Krauss. Suddenly we could see Ötzi with unprecedented clarity. And what they discovered completely overturned everything we thought we knew about him. For 30 years, museum visitors had been looking at Ötzi's mummified remains and making assumptions. His skin appeared light, weathered by the elements. His hair seemed brown, thinning. Artists' reconstructions showed him as a typical Alpine European, fair-skinned, light-eyed, with a full head of hair. They were completely wrong. When the DNA results came back, I had to read them 3 times. Admits Dr. Valentina Koya, one of the study's lead researchers. Everything we thought we knew about how Ötzi looked was incorrect. The genetic evidence was crystal clear. Ötzi had dark skin, similar to people from North Africa or Southern Europe today. His eyes were brown or hazel, not blue. And perhaps most surprisingly, he was almost completely bald. A victim of male pattern baldness caused by a genetic variant that increased his risk of hair loss by 6 times. But how could the DNA be so different from what we were seeing? The answer lies in the extraordinary preservation process that saved Ötzi for posterity. The cold, dry conditions of the glacier preserved his tissues but also transformed them. His skin darkened and became leathery as it lost water and fat. His remaining hair became lighter as it lost melanin. The mummification process had essentially given Ötzi a makeover, one that fooled scientists for 3 decades. It's a powerful reminder, says Dr. Zink, that we can't judge ancient people by their mummified remains. The real Ötzi looked nothing like the body we found. But Ötzi's DNA revealed more than just his appearance. It rewrote the story of European migration and ancestry. When researchers compared Ötzi's genome to those of modern Europeans and ancient populations, they discovered something remarkable. Ötzi wasn't descended from the hunter-gatherers who had lived in Europe for tens of thousands of years. Instead, 92% of his ancestry traced back to Anatolian farmers, people from present-day Turkey who had migrated to Europe around 8,000 years ago. Ötzi was essentially living proof of one of the most significant migrations in human history. Explains Dr. David Reich, a Harvard geneticist who studies ancient DNA. His ancestors were part of the agricultural revolution that transformed Europe from a continent of hunter-gatherers to one of farmers. These Anatolian farmers brought with them not just agriculture, but new technologies, new ways of life, and new genes. They spread across Europe, mixing with local populations and fundamentally changing the genetic landscape of the continent. But Ötzi's genetic makeup revealed something else. He lived in an isolated community. While most of Europe was experiencing gene flow between different populations, Ötzi's Alpine Valley remained relatively cut off. His DNA showed almost no mixture with Western European hunter-gatherers or Eastern European herders, groups that were already blending elsewhere on the continent. Today, Ötzi's closest living relatives aren't found in the Alps, where he died, but on the island of Sardinia, which also maintained high levels of Anatolian farmer ancestry due to its geographic isolation. But perhaps the most compelling part of Ötzi's story isn't where he came from, it's how he died. The evidence of violence was unmistakable. Ötzi had a deep gash on his right hand, just days old when he died. His ribs showed signs of trauma, and most tellingly, there was an arrowhead lodged deep in his left shoulder, having severed a major artery and caused massive internal bleeding. This wasn't an accident, states Dr. Andreas Nerlich, a forensic pathologist who studied Ötzi's remains. Someone hunted this man down and killed him. The crime scene tells a dramatic story. Ötzi was found at an elevation of 10,500 feet in a rocky gully protected from the wind. His killer had removed the arrow shaft but left the flint arrowhead embedded in his shoulder, either unable to extract it or unwilling to risk the time trying. Ötzi's final hours were clearly traumatic. The cut on his hand suggests he fought back against his attacker. The blood evidence indicates he survived for some time after being shot, possibly trying to pull out the arrow himself. Eventually, he collapsed in that mountain gully and the glacier claimed him. But who was his killer, and why? Theories abound. Some suggest Ötzi was involved in a territorial dispute. Perhaps he crossed into another group's hunting grounds. Others believe it was a personal vendetta, revenge for some earlier conflict. His valuable copper axe might have made him a target for robbery, though it was left with his body. The truth is, we may never know, admits Dr. Zink. But that's what makes Ötzi so fascinating. He's not just a scientific specimen, he's a real person with a real story, one that ended in violence and tragedy. The 2023 DNA breakthrough didn't happen overnight. It was the result of years of painstaking work by international teams of scientists, each bringing their own expertise to bear on Ötzi's ancient secrets. Dr. Krauss's team at the Max Planck Institute had to overcome enormous technical challenges. Ancient DNA is incredibly fragile. Exposure to oxygen, bacteria, and time degrades it into tiny fragments. Traditional DNA sequencing techniques simply couldn't handle such degraded material. We had to develop entirely new approaches, explains Dr. Krauss. We used specialized clean rooms, contamination protocols that would make a pharmaceutical lab jealous, and computational techniques that didn't even exist 10 years ago. The process required extracting DNA from just 0.1 grams of bone powder, less than the weight of a paperclip. That tiny sample had to be treated with extreme care, protected from any modern contamination that could skew the results. Even then, only about 0.1% of the DNA they extracted was actually from Ötzi. The rest came from bacteria and environmental contamination. Sophisticated computer algorithms had to sort through millions of genetic fragments, identifying which pieces belonged to Ötzi and which were contamination. It's like having a jigsaw puzzle where 99.9% of the pieces belong to different puzzles, describes Dr. Koya. Our job was to find Ötzi's pieces and put them together to see the complete picture. The breakthrough came when they realized they could use the contaminating bacterial DNA as a reference point, helping them identify which fragments were genuinely ancient and which were modern contamination. When the 2023 DNA study was published in the journal Cell Genomics, it sent shockwaves through both the scientific community and the public imagination. Social media exploded with discussions about Ötzi's true appearance. Memes comparing what we thought Ötzi looked like versus what Ötzi actually looked like went viral. Museums around the world began updating their exhibits and reconstructions to reflect the new findings. People were fascinated by the idea that we'd been wrong about Ötzi's appearance for so long, notes Dr. Zink, but more than that, they were amazed by how much we could learn from ancient DNA. The discovery sparked broader conversations about human migration, ancient ancestry, and how we visualize the past. It reminded people that our ancestors were more diverse, more complex, and more human than we often imagine. For the scientific community, Ötzi's genome represents a watershed moment. It's not just about one man from 5,300 years ago. It's about what ancient DNA can tell us about human history, migration patterns, and the story of our species. Today, Ötzi remains in his climate-controlled chamber in Bolzano, still keeping secrets that future technology might unlock. But thanks to the revolutionary DNA analysis of 2023, we now know him better than any other person from the ancient world. He wasn't just a frozen body found by chance hikers. He was a man with dark skin and brown eyes, descended from Turkish farmers, living in an isolated alpine community, struggling with arthritis and hair loss, carrying sophisticated tools and ancient wisdom, until someone shot him in the back with an arrow and ended his story. But in a way, Ötzi's story continues. Every new scientific technique, every technological breakthrough brings us closer to understanding not just who he was, but who we are. Ötzi the Iceman isn't just a window into the past. He's a mirror reflecting our shared humanity across 5,300 years of time. And that's a story worth preserving forever.